Hey everyone, and welcome back to another chapter of this making of. Here we're gonna start modeling the bigger construction pieces that gonna support a lot of the buildings in this render. Uh, the ideas still remain the same in the final render, but the placements and a little bit of the look changes throughout. As I was doing the layout afterwards. So for this, I took like the blocking stage geometry, and I started, going at it. There's very interesting thing that happened here at the beginning of this video is I was supposed to merge couple of edges, and instead of not merge but connect rather. So I was, instead of using something like the cut faces tool or split polygon tool and just go one by one, what I did is I did triangulate, and because the number of edges on the top and the bottom were the same, I did triangulate, and then immediately I did quadrangulate, which deleted all the diagonal edges but left all the straight ones, which is a great way to get really fast bridge type connections happening. So same with this piece, I literally just selected the faces and extracted them, and then instead of moving the vertices around by hand, I actually took the cut tool, and I just cut and deleted the rest because when you're dealing with faces on an angle, it's much easier to redraw the topology rather than moving it by hand. It's going to be much more precise. So here I wanted to add this structure on the column at the bottom and the top to kind of make it feel more rigid and kind of pop because as I was developing the props, I realized that there's going to be a lot of props in this scene, and modeling each and every prop to the level that I wanted was going to take me too long. And because I mentioned that I had a deadline, the solution that I got was to make a lot of the big shapes kind of stand out and just put a little bit of detail here and there, but not everywhere, because it was just not possible with the deadline that I had. So this is one of the tricks that I use all the time for dealing with these kind of situations where I have creative freedom. So I do try to emphasize the big shapes first, make them read well, make them get the feeling that I want to convey, and then just put a little bit of detail here and there, like construction details like bolts and stuff like that, to kind of sell the idea. But I'm not going like crazy with details everywhere. So this is a place where I want to describe how I'm dealing with open geometry. So every time I have a model that is intersecting with another model, I usually try to optimize as much as I can and delete the faces on the inside. However, dealing with this kind of situation can be tricky, especially nowadays where we are using global illumination for rendering. So it can be dangerous to kind of do this all over the place, because especially if you're using global illumination that is not brute force. If you're using like a point cloud or something like that, if you have an open face of a building, for example, let's say you model just a facade, but you don't have anything in the back. First of all, the scene is going to look too bright because there's nothing at the back to cast the shadow and make it look darker. And second of all, if there is no geometry, like even a proxy geometry, it doesn't matter. At the back, a light leaking can happen, and you can start experiencing a lot of artifacts that you might not know how to fix. So because of that, I have a rule that if one geometry intersects with another one, then I can go and delete the faces that are on the inside between these two geometry. I hope that makes sense. But I would never do that on an open surface that will be visible from multiple angles because of the reasons that I mentioned before. So this piece in particular was really interesting for me because I did a lot of exploration in 3D. Like I had one idea when I was doing the 2D, but it was not working for me for some reason here. So I kind of just looked around some references and how this kind of stuff work, and kind of came up with a different solution that is going to work better. And because these are very large constructions, I added panel and cut lines and like huge bolts to kind of get this rigid, strong feel that this thing can support a building that is resting on. So as you can see, I am reusing geometry like crazy, just like before, because it's the fastest way to get something done in this kind of case. For example, I made the bolt before, but I didn't make the cap of the bolt, so I just used the top part and kind of merged it together. And using Shift D, once I duplicated it once with the center pivot on the center of the object, of the column rather, just by pressing Shift D again and again, I would go around that arc. So yeah, that's just one little tip. This was a little bit of a tricky area of how to resolve this. I wanted to, at the beginning, I wanted to have a different feel, have like a construction planes going between these cylindrical columns to kind of get like a level of like a layering or leveling feel, but I got rid of that idea because it was feeling too crowded, and I knew that I'm gonna have a lot of stuff happening after this one, like layering stuff on top of this. So it would have been a waste of time, and like no one would have noticed any of the details. So instead of that, I decided to focus on a lot of silhouette breaking forms, like this spherical detail in the middle of a cylinder. It's something that's gonna pick up the highlight really nicely when you put the metal shader on, and you can do cool stuff like add like chipped metal and like rust and stuff. So it's an opportunity to break the surface a little bit and the silhouette, and focus the attention of the viewer to when they're like looking at the render, to kind of notice this. So that was the thought process behind that. And then in the middle, I just needed something to connect, and I already had a couple of pieces modeled, so I figured I can just duplicate what I have at the bottom and the top, and kind of use the same design language, but modify it slightly so it doesn't look like a lazy job. So it doesn't look like I just took it from the bottom and just slapped it on the top. And then once these diagonal pillars were done, I added a little bit of construction cut lines and stuff like that, because if this was a real world object, it's probably not made of one gigantic metal tube, but that's going to be like super heavy to do, super hard to do, and super heavy as well. So I tried to add a little bit of a sense to that. And also then I needed a connection on how this thing how the diagonal column connects to the big one. So I just I did a simple cylinder block out, and then I upres that and just stole some of the bolts from the top, and it was pretty much done. So after I finished one, that's the power of 3D, I just duplicated it on the other side. And here is a quick little detail. I added a welding seam, which it's not something that you necessarily see in an environment as large as this one, but if you really start like zooming in and poking around, you will notice this kind of stuff, or at least some of some of us will. So yeah, this was like a really quick chapter. I just wanted to share how I would approach something like this. And as you can see, I'm just trying to move it around and see how it's going to look like at render time. And yeah, so in the next chapter, we're going to continue with a lot of props modeling. So thanks guys for sticking around, and I'll see you in the next one.